Hello, and thanks for joining us for this year's Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce Forums for races being held during the 2024 general election season. Tonight's forums are hosted by the Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce, produced here at the Central Educational Center for Broadcast, and we have great thanks for our advocacy sponsor for tonight's forums, AT&T. This year's Chamber Forums feature a number of Coweta-centered races for local, state, and federal positions, including contested races for the Georgia State House. This forum specifically is for Georgia State House District 67, which centers on southern Fulton County, covers parts of northern Coweta County, making its representative part of our Coweta County State House delegation. Early voting has begun, and it will conclude with Election Day on November 5th. We have two candidates in our district race, and one is Lydia Glaze, Democrat and the incumbent for this post, and her challenger, Matthew Hammett. Representative Glaze could be with us tonight. We thank you very much for being here, and Mr. Hammett could not make it tonight. Our forum is intended to give voters an opportunity to hear the views of candidates on issues faced by the communities represented in this district and the state of Georgia. And so we're going to give Representative Glaze an opportunity tonight to tell us a little bit about herself and about the things that are most important to her as a lawmaker in the State House of Representatives. Just one quick note, the Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates for office. Questions have been submitted by chamber members and apply equally to all of our candidates participating in our forum. But with that, I want to thank Representative Glaze again for joining us and for choosing to run in this important election. We're going to do a couple of things. If you could sort of give us a bit of an opening statement, Representative Glaze, and tell us a little bit about why you're running, why service in the State House is important to you, and what issues are most important to you.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Coweta Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum and making sure that the residents of Coweta has access to their elected officials so that they'll know where our lens and where our focus will be as we enter into this new biennial. I want to thank you, Mr. Jackson, for moderating. Well, I'm Representative Lydia Glaze, and I live in South Fulton. I'm the mother of 7 children, been married to my husband 40 years, been in Georgia for 43 years. My dad was born and raised in Georgia. My mom was born and raised in Alabama. They were sharecroppers, and they met in New Jersey, and that's where I was born and raised. And all of my schooling, K through 12, college, and then graduate, was all been in New Jersey. So I actually chose to move to Georgia because as a child growing up and visiting my grandmother, it was important to me to be in a space where I thought that there was opportunities, number one, there was inclusiveness, number two, and there was civility. I didn't feel that growing up. A lot in New Jersey, there were just sections of where people lived. And then we all met at high school or elementary and middle school. And so for me, I've had the opportunity since moving here is to raise my children, get married, raise my children in communities that were inclusive. And so I continue to, as an educator, stand here before you because I want to make sure that my grandchildren have the Georgia that my children had, and then even a better Georgia. So as I sit on the K through 12 education and higher ed for this state, I am at a space and place where I can see and help and get involved in what I think is the equalizer for all people, and that is a decent and an equitable education, public education. And so I stand here before you today and say the work is not finished in Georgia. I want to go back. I want to do more work. I believe there's an SOS call out for Georgia, and that's just simply we got to save students. As you guys know, we've got to save sisters, women who are having babies. We've got to save our sons, and we've got to save our seniors. And so with that said, I'm ready to go back and do more work that's going to impact our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, our counties, and our state. I'm Lydia Glaze. I'm your incumbent for House District 67.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to ask you, let me just ask you, if you don't mind, a few questions that we'd ordinarily ask during our forum. One of them is about education, but it's something that we want to ask within our forums. And I know that you as lawmakers have talked a good bit tonight. Of course, following the tragic school shooting at Appalachia High School in Winder on September 4th, Georgia Speaker John Burns said that he expects lawmakers will consider perhaps several new state policies, particularly aimed at student mental health, gun detection, and other measures in next year's General Assembly session. Certainly, the members of the General Assembly who are elected in these races, they're going to be among those lawmakers. What position do you take on this, and what measures do you think are most important in keeping Georgia schools safe?
Well, first of all, I want to say I respect our Speaker, Speaker John Burns. It's been a good relationship that I've garnered with him over the past 2 years. And as I sit on K-12 education, I know for sure that we have had bills. I dropped a bill that would help us make sure that students were safe. It was called the Head, Heat, and Heart Bill. And what that meant was that our students are having problems with mental and emotional, so that was their mental and emotional state. That was the head. The heart and the heat is what is happening due to climate change. Our kids are facing hotter days as they enter into sports over the summer, and during the fall, their opportunities to have heat injuries are increased at 11%. We need to do something about it. And so when I put that bill together, I was thinking that what we needed to do was make sure that there were trained people in the building, in all schools, that they could determine that kids were having problems mentally and emotionally, that kids who were out, whether it was PE or in a sport, that they were having problems with the heat. Heat usually directly affects your heart. And so that bill would have allowed our staff and administrators to be trained so that they could actually see the signs and give that information over to a clinician who would help keep our children safe in the school building. But there are a plethora of bills that I believe we should bring back up, and that there should be bipartisan and bicameral support so that we keep our kids safe. We should have had the bill passed where we would mandate parents to make sure that their firearms were stored in a proper place so that their students or their young people under 18 would not be able to have access to them. I believe that if we don't do this work now, we cannot lose more students. When we lose a student to violence, we also lose the student who committed the crime. And are we committing crimes by not taking a more stronger position to keep our children safe? Mental illness is an issue. I have it in my family. I just had my brother with me today. He's 67 years old, and I still take care of him. My parents are no longer with us. But if we had not seen that when he was a teenager, a late teenager, he had those tendencies of seeing things and hearing things that were not going to harm him, but yet he thought he might be harmed. And so we need to see that in students, even if they're 14 years old, to be able to keep the rest of the students safe and that 14-year-old safe and get them assistance. So I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of bills dropped again, but what I want to say is we can never just sit on this as we have done all these years. We must do and bring common sense gun laws. We must bring common sense safety measures into our school system to save our sons and daughters. I'm ready.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate that. We only have a minute or so left. Let me sort of shift it a little bit, and that is to this being a Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce. I want to talk a little bit about prosperity. And one of the things the Chamber talks about for prosperity for all Cowetans and for all Georgians Georgians are often the 4 E's. The 4 E's being education, which you've addressed here, energy, environment, particularly environmental stewardship of our natural resources, and economic development. We're going to be asking our candidates about various ones of those. Let me ask you just very quickly, if you take a minute or so and tell us a little bit about economic development. How well is Georgia positioned for economic development going into the future?
Well, absolutely. 10 years in a row, as you know, Georgia has the distinction and I think the honor of being the #1 place to do business. And I'm honored that we have that distinction. Our tax credits help us continue to keep that. We'll continue to keep those tax credits in place so that we can keep that distinction. But what I want to do is make sure that there is a pipeline of students who are ready and capable of going into new markets. And that means that I think it ties right back to education, that we've got to have a QBE that is reflective of new markets and new training and opportunities like here at the CEC, where our students actually learn in high school some of the digital skill sets that they're going to need to go into the marketplace, whether they do it after college or do it right out of high school. But we need to make sure that that digital divide is lessened, because we are making sure we've got the right schools with the right classes and courses and trainers in place so that no county, especially Coweta, is not left behind. We cannot be left behind in Coweta County.
Thank you so much. Representative Glaze, that brings us to the end, but thank you so much again for being here tonight, and thank you for running in this race, and best of luck to you in November.
And thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, ma'am. And that brings us to the end of this House District 67 Forum. Thanks again to the Newnan-Coweta Chamber, to AT&T and the Central Educational Center, and the student interns for tonight's forums. Hope you tune in to all of our forums covering a number of races throughout Coweta County.